This is Lemon's Car Spotting. You post to Instagram with the hashtag Lemon's Car Spotting. We pick the hooptiest.
They are so incredibly terrible.
And which one we want to become a real Lemons build.
It does car-like things. We've been pushing for one of those in Lemons too, and those are very affordable.
Hello, Internet. This is Lemon's Car Spotting. I am Nick. That is Eric.
You pointed the wrong way, which is great. Anyway, this is Lemon's Car Spotting. And this is a feature we're adding to our YouTube channel. Basically, you're out in the wild, you're going to the store, you're walking your dog, you see an interesting car, take a picture of it, post it on Instagram with the hashtag Lemon's Car Spotting, as I point the wrong way too. And we'll talk about them on this YouTube show and make fun of them and talk about cars we've seen in Lemons that are that car and so on and so forth. It's going to be great. We enjoy doing it. We think you'll enjoy watching it.
Yep. And for each episode, we have two winners. We have the hooptiest and we have the Lemons build. The hooptiest, pretty self-explanatory. Which car of that week is the hooptiest? And the Lemons build is the car that we want to see become an actual Lemons race car.
That's right. And this week, we're going to let Nick pick who gets to decide the hooptiest and who gets to decide the Lemons build with our proprietary picking system. So Lemons build on the left, hooptiest on the right. Nick, close your eyes and tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Right hands up. Nick's picking the hooptiest, and I'm
picking the hooptiest.
We will want, and I am picking the car that we want to see built for Lemons. So let us get started.
That is it. Let's get into it. All right. Mismatched body panels are always a good look.
Man, a teal 90s car is also always a good look. Mostly teal anyway.
Yeah, mostly teal. You know what's interesting is like the alternate color gas door is sort of a 90s Fast and Furious, like I did it on purpose affectation, as is maybe the two-tone above the belt line design. But the also fender that is also a different color leads me to believe that maybe some of this was not quite so intentional.
Yeah, they've got the side molding in that color and the spoiler as well. It's all a thing that somebody did. Yep.
And this is from our friend Jake, Panama Car Spotting down there in Panama City, always providing us with lots of good stuff. All right, next up. Oh man, we're into one of the.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, so I thought at first glance that it was a Galant, but apparently it is a Nissan, which is this is maybe the Panamanian market Nissan Sentra. It looks like
like a Stanza, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's the next size up. Yeah. Exactly.
My initial thought was a Cressida almost, but it's not quite right for a Cressida. Yeah, but it looks general look of 80s, Japanese saloon.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, according to the description, Jake there in Panama says that it is a 1987 Nissan Saloon. So that answers that.
There you go.
All right. Oh
man,
gold for the honey. This is a school. This is School of Race Car. I believe that's a Lemons race team.
Yeah, I can't place what they race at the moment, but I do love the beautifully cut vinyl on that is bubbled and disgusting, and the door handles are the lowest effort I've ever seen on anything automotive related.
Yeah, I was going to say the detail work is especially good around the door handles. You know, the Prius, we've seen a couple of Priuses in lemons. And what's interesting about the Prius, it's like the number one car that car people hate. But then as soon as one shows up in lemons, people are like, $500 my ass. So there is this acknowledgement that these cars have value for somebody, and hey, if that's not you, that's fine, but that doesn't make it the worst vehicle ever made. So you know,
I've driven a couple different Prii. You know, the one time I went to the Ridge in Portland, like the rental car fleet was entirely Priuses, which is very Portland. But you know, I drove it. It's a totally reasonable car to drive. No issues with
it's a car. It's a car, you know.
It's good at doing car-like things.
Right. This will shock our audience, but most people don't care about their car in the way that we gearheads do. So you know, they regard their car as they would their dishwasher, and they just want it to function in a very basic sense. And the Prius, in fact, does that. So it works for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of functioning in a basic sense.
I was wondering which of us was going to go directly to that. Yeah, this is the polar opposite.
Now, the Chevette, first of all, the Chevette was in production for a staggeringly long period of time. I think the last year you could get one was 87, which is wild. I mean, like 87 is the year that like the Porsche 959 came out. I mean, 87 is a modern car year. And yet you could get this totally 70s era crap box brand new from the dealer at the same time. I mean, not that there were a lot of people cross-shopping Chevettes and 959s, but
you know, the Chevette's an interest. I think it was actually 89 was the last model year, because like all things GM, they had, you know, 7 years of parts stocked up and they had already paid for them, so they may as well build the stupid thing. But
fair enough.
In the early years, you could buy the Chevette scooter, which was the base model of the car, and the back seats were optional. That was an option, was a back seat. So you could buy a 2-seater Chevette in like 1978.
So what was there instead? Just like a doormat?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a Chevette scooter doesn't exist and hasn't for 25 years. So there's no, I don't know. Nobody's taking a picture of one either, because nobody's intentionally trying to sell one. So, I mean, if you have a picture of a Chevette scooter back seat, link it in the comments. We actually really want to see what that looks like. If it's, I just figure it's kind of like a Ken doll, you know, like
it's just blank, just a molded piece of something. This one, conversely, I mean, it almost looks like this air dam up front is factory, which means that this looks like it was maybe a optioned up example. You know, there's something else I just noticed in the background that maybe you.
Is that an Alante or is that an ETC?
It is. I think it's an Alante. It looks like an Alante to me. But in any case, two very European inspired General Motors cars right here.
Yeah, the Chevette was some kind of opal underneath.
Everything. it was an opal based item indeed. All right, next.
And that does look like the sport trim.
Whatever that was called. Yeah, if you know what the Chevette sport trim was called that got you this sweet ass air dam, then post that in the comments. All right. Oh, wrong button. There we go. Well,
I mean, there it is.
There it is. This is a car. Now, I don't know. We're back in Panama City, and I don't know what the rate of Chevy S10 / GMC Sonoma these are, how prevalent they are down there in Panama. Obviously, here in the States, they're everywhere still. They are one example of 80s General Motors cars that didn't become extinct. Not a whole lot to say about that one.
Yeah, my dad had a 86 S10, maybe it's an 87, and Iron Duke 5-speed, and he drove that thing for 10 or 12 years, put like 270,000 miles on it, and sold it to somebody who drove it for another decade. So, I mean,
well, it's one of the poster children of the adage that GM cars will run poorly longer than most cars run at all.
Yeah.
So, Speaking of hand-me-down cars in your family, what are you driving at the moment that's not your Volvo?
Oh, thank you. I had my dad's other long-running truck, which was a year 2000 model Ford Ranger, 4-cylinder 5-speed that was mostly rusted into the earth. I just gave that back to him, and don't have a functioning car for myself at the moment, but I have some wheels. So I'm driving a Volkswagen Jetta at the moment, but Well, the Ranger was. I mean, I called it. I referred to it on our daily calls as the incel mobile, and I think that's about right. So.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, or I thought it was the insurrection mobile because it did have the vibe of the kind of car that you would drive to the Capitol to take over the government.
Right. And, 6
when you're it's really two sides of the same coin. All right, moving on. Now, earlier when you were talking about the ETC,
what a transition!
Oh man. Yeah, so this is a Cadillac. For those who don't know, Cadillac had a car called the Eldorado Touring Coupe, which was a 2-door Eldorado front drive North Star machine. And Eldorado Touring Coupe was abbreviated as ETC. And so on the back, it said ETC. And it was like, hey, man, what year's your et cetera?
Oh, Jesus. Doesn't it? And now Cody's in Berkeley, and that looks like a Florida license plate to me, which is I mean, if you're going to own an etc., Florida seems like the place it would end up. How it got to California sounds like a hell of a story.
Yeah. Well, it got to California. It was never registered in California, and it got parked in the yard. So I'm sure there's a tale that goes along with that. All right. Well, the et cetera's ears were burning, or what is it? The Candy Man, where you say the word and he shows up. In any case, we're talking about et cetera's earlier, and now here one is. Okay, next. Man, we're Panama heavy this time, but this is the kind of car I expect to see in Latin American countries, largely because they produced air-cooled Volkswagens in large numbers long after they had stopped in other parts of the world. I know they made them in Brazil, they made them in Mexico, so it's not hard to figure how some of these cars will sort of spread and remain common in some of these places.
I like the headlights. They look like pop-ups off of some 80s like Nissan Pulsar or something.
Yeah, I think you're right. Cause they're like missing they're triangle shaped. And then it looks like there's supposed to be some trim or something that goes around the outside that this one does not have. What's interesting is, of course, the Baja Bug sort of had this cut down fender look, and a lot of those Baja Bug kits had the headlights in the hood. And then this guy, I think he had maybe not an intentional front fender removal on this particular example. And he had an opportunity to make it look intentional by putting some round headlights up on the front. But no, he went with the Nissan Pulsar headlights mounted where the old ones maybe should have been. He's also got some driving
signals.
Lights down below.
Yeah, the turn signals on the hood too.
Yeah, and then the turn signals, those would have been on the top of the stock fender. So anyway, it's a nice feature. I like the big tires in the back also.
Yeah, that's a quality Lemons rally machine right there.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen some bugs in Lemons races, and the issue with bugs is behind the back there isn't a whole lot of structure. So our tech staff usually requires you to go beyond the normal on paper Lemons rules when you're building a Bug. So while it is possible, it requires a little extra work. And so, check in with us if that's something you want to do. All right. I think this is Johan's personal car. You can't Lemons World your own car, can you? Well, I guess you can.
Well, he has. So, I mean,
yeah. Apparently.
Speaking of bugs, he's got a bug and his 911 in there.
Yep. 2 bugs, one would argue.
Indeed. And again, the high mileage thing, another Lemons Rally entry we had recently was a GMC Jimmy that the family had meant to sell at 270,000 miles or whatever, and couldn't get rid of it. Nobody would buy it, so they just decided to take it on a Lemons Rally instead. Yeah. So I mean, that's always an option if you have an elderly vehicle.
Yeah, that's a good send off for something like that. And I'm sure Johan drives this thing around when either of these VW products aren't working. So,
well, that never happens with Volkswagen products, as we're well acquainted with.
Yeah. Well, and of course, Porsches are completely different than Volkswagens. So
correct.
Yep. All right. Next up. Oh man. This is from a new poster I don't think we've seen yet. Lemons Ruins Lives. that is
Lemons Rally boss Jeff Stobbs. That is his account, which is
that's about right.
Yep.
Yeah. So these are Packards. I think that this is the car that Doc Brown drove in Back to the Future in 1955. I think he had a convertible version of a similar Packard, if I'm not mistaken.
Man, you stumped me. I have no idea, but it looks about right. I mean, man, those are good looking cars too.
Yeah. Well, Judge Phil has a similar era 1941 Plymouth that he's turning into sort of a resto mod thing. As with all projects of that nature, it's been dragging on for decades.
Yeah, it's like 7 or 8 years into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last entry for this week. Oh man. Craftwork Joe. This is another new poster I don't think we've seen.
Speaking of Candyman, I had just referenced the Tornado Trofeo in an email to you and Jay. So I mean,
there
it is.
The Tornado Trofeo. Now you're going to have to fill us in on what this is. We're from California and haven't seen one of these in 35 years. So what's the story of the Tornado Trofeo?
Now, I will confess to not knowing very much about these, but I'm almost certain they were the Oldsmobile twin of the Rayada. So it had the touchscreen CRT in it. So, this information system, one of the early touchscreens that probably functioned very poorly. Some of them had that. They didn't all have that. And this had the ubiquitous 3800 V6 and a 4-speed automatic, and probably some plush, carpeting and what do you call the really crappy cloth that they used in the 80s? Whatever it was, they used a lot of it. So,
so I just noticed that the license plate says Biz Coupe on it.
That's right.
It reminds me a little bit of the Big Lebowski when he's talking about his papers, his business papers.
Yeah.
And that's I think that the business that he's referring to is the same business that the Tornado Trofeo owner is involved in.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say this thing is freaking mint. I mean,
yeah. World's
I haven't
nicest.
seen one. I haven't seen one in any condition, and this one is really exceptional.
Yeah, I dig it. I like the fake wire wheels was totally an Oldsmobile thing in the 80s. Like every Cutlass Sierra in the world that didn't have Steelies had those wheels on them.
Yep. And the raised white letters are a nice touch, as they always are.
I dig it. Well, Craftwork Joe, if that's your car, that's a spectacular machine right there.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, that brings us to the end, which means we have to pick some award winners. I was on the hook for the hooptiest, and there was some to choose from here, man. Packards were an obvious choice. not so much the Honda, definitely the Bug. But the car that I select, for sure the etc. The car that I selected was, in fact, the Chevette. And here's why. Well, two reasons. It gets bonus points for having an Elante parked behind it.
That's right.
But, the Chevette was introduced, and General Motors arguably still hasn't figured this out. But, when the fuel crisis hit, General Motors didn't have a small car. And so they sort of at the last minute, like, okay, well, we've got some connection to Opel, and Opel's making small cars for the European market. And so we can take one of those, rebadge it, use it for the American market as sort of a stopgap. But then as far as I can tell, they've just continued to do that. I mean, who knows what kind of Daewoo you get when you buy a compact Chevrolet these days. So I think that it's really indicative of General Motors' just generally hoopty strategy when it comes to small cars. Car companies like Honda and Toyota have made quite a good business of making really quality and reliable small cars that young people buy and develop brand loyalty because they have a good experience with them. General Motors, they just, we're going to outsource it. If it's an Opel, if it's a Daewoo, who cares? If it's good, who cares? That's incredibly hoopty. And so this week's hooptiest is the Chevette.
Well picked. Well picked. That is, yeah, that's well said. And this is probably like an 89 also, or like an 88, which makes
it's a late model. Yeah.
There was some facelift somewhere in there, I'm sure, in GM terms. But
right.
The car we'd want to see in Lemons, man, there's two of them in there that are cars we've never had in Lemons that I would love to see. And the first one is the etc. It's so good. V8, 300 horsepower, bring it to Lemons. It'll last like 5 laps. It'd be great.
Sure. Yeah.
But the other one we haven't seen yet, and we love all the orphan brands, is one of those Packards with a roll cage and the straight 8.
Yeah.
We will throw trophies at you. That's just, any kind of mid-century American stuff looks so good on a road racing track in the most bizarre way. The 47 Plymouth, the 53 Chrysler that we've had. This fits kind of right in that motif. Would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. The 47 Plymouth Bad Decisions Racing has run for several years. The other one that you mentioned, whatever that was,
like a 52 New Yorker.
Yeah. And then of course the 41 Oldsmobile.
Yes,
with the straight 8 that Tetanus Racing sometimes runs down there in Texas. So you're making a statement when you show up with one of these. You can prep it kind of however you want. Bad Decisions has swapped in sort of later suspension and drivetrain into their 47 Plymouth. The 41 Olds is essentially stock. So if you have an idea of how you would prep a Packard for Lemons Racing, then go ahead and post it down in the comments.
All right. I think that's going to wrap it up here for Lemons Car Spotting this week. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new video and another one of these next Thursday.
Yep. Until then, stay out there, look for your cars, post them, tag them Lemons Car Spotting. We'll see you next time.
Man, that is a coot machine right there.
It really is. And, how many of them have ever been on a road course? This is your chance.